Today we are jumping into Unit 2, Day 2, and whereas last class we talked about the Southern colonies, today we're going to be focusing on the New England and the Middle colonies and how they developed and what exactly they looked like. So to start today, you're going to have to read a little bit of a selection from City on a Hill document. And I'm asking you to read that 3 times, writing down your understanding of that, and then writing a reflection on what you learned from that. So the New England colonies, what was the purpose of them? Really, it can be laid out in this statement by John Winthrop, who said, "For we must consider that we shall be as a city on a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world." And really, that sums up what the purpose of the New England colonies there. They saw themselves, going back to the biblical reference to some of Jesus's teaching, where he says that his believers should be as a city upon a hill. And that's what they reviewed their purpose as, to come here for religious freedom and then to be this example and model of a Christian society for the rest of the world. You're going to see the New England colonies were a very, very close-knit society, very, very similar in their viewpoints and their beliefs. You're going to see the environmental conditions there were really kind of rough, which made it so that they kind of forced them to have to work together. And with that, they were able to develop a mixed economy based on both agriculture and commerce. So how did they get started? Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies, both of these would be settled by English Protestants who dissented from the Anglican Church. King James I, he viewed these dissenters as a threat to his religious and political authority during that time and often ordered them arrested and jailed. So because of that, you're going to have men, women, and children come to the New England colonies. Now, if you compare this to early Jamestown, the first groups that came into Jamestown were primarily all men. They were coming there to make money, hopefully to find gold, but then eventually that, of course, transforms into tobacco growing. But the Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies, you'll see that they come for the express purpose of we are creating a permanent settlement, and that's why they brought their whole family with them. Now, the Plymouth colony, this one was founded by radical dissenters who would be known as the Pilgrims. They would set sail to Virginia on the Mayflower. They would be blown off course, and that's why they would end up landing in Massachusetts. Now, before they got off of the Mayflower, they drew up and signed what would be known as the Mayflower Compact that pledged to make decisions by the will of the people. So their government and how they were going to do things was set up right on the Mayflower. Things, just like Jamestown, were not easy. Of course, New England, the winters are a lot more harsh than they are here in Virginia. In the first winter, you're going to see that half of the colony dies. Friendly natives would help the colonists, and they would end up all celebrating together in 1621 in what became known as Thanksgiving. But you're going to see it was very, very brutal there at the beginning for the colonists who didn't really know how to survive in this environment and didn't have the tools to survive within that environment in that New England climate. Now, the Massachusetts colony, this would be a group of more moderate dissenters that wanted to purify the Church of England, which is why they got the name the Puritans. And they sought religious freedom from the persecution of Charles I, who was actively persecuting them over in England. So by 1630, you're going to have 1,000 Puritans led by John Winthrop, who is pictured there, who sail for Massachusetts and end up founding Boston. 15,000 more settlers would come to Massachusetts due to that Civil War in England. So you're going to see how these colonies would grow pretty quickly based on what was happening over in England. Now, Puritan society, you're going to see with Puritan, their land distribution, all landowners had a voice. And this is going to be a little bit different than, remember, the Chesapeake, where the really big landowners were the ones that had a majority of the political power. The Puritans believed that anybody that owned land should have a voice within their government there. The male heads of families would receive some land from the family, but what this would eventually quickly result in is that the Puritans have to continue pushing out west because quickly their land gets subdivided among the many, many children, which meant that people had to move out west if they wanted to find more land. And out west, I mean the western part of the Massachusetts colony. So what are the economic characteristics? Obviously, New England, the climate and the soil there is very, very different. The soil is very, very rocky there. You have a shorter growing system. So their focus is going to be more on trading and commerce. So shipbuilding, fishing, lumbering would be the really, really big industries there. And I always say the way that you can remember that is they went out, cut down trees to build ships so that they could go fishing. Also, you'd have small scale farming there, again, to support their families. Again, you didn't see a ton of the large scale farming there just because the climate and the soil was not good enough to be able to do that. And eventually you'd see manufacturing would become a major industry within New England as well. And the Puritans were known for their very, very strong belief in the values of hard work and thrift. They believed very, very deeply in hard work and then not spending money on everything. So if the Puritans were around today, they wouldn't be excited about the newest iPhone, that they'd still be rocking their original iPhone today. They wouldn't believe in constantly upgrading. So they believed in thrift, and that's how they lived. Political life, they use town meetings. You can see some examples here of some churches or some town halls where they would have met. Early on, obviously, it would have been churches that eventually transformed into town halls. And all male freemen had the right to vote within these areas. And this town meeting comes back from an Athenian direct democracy model where everybody, again, all the male would have had some sort of say and would have got to vote on decisions being made within those colonies. Covenant communities. Now, you're going to see organization was loosely based on a joint stock corporation with John Winthrop, again, pictured there, and shareholders organizing founding colonies. But really, they were known as covenant communities is what these New England ones were, because they all agreed to a covenant or a rule, usually based upon the Bible, and then their Mayflower Compact or whatever other covenants or compacts they would have come up with. We've talked a little bit about who would have had the vote in the New England colonies. Obviously, it would have been the men during that time, and the law that really governed them was the Bible and then what came out of their town hall meetings. Dissidents. Now, these were people who did not agree with the Puritans. So one of the great ironies is that the Puritans and the Pilgrims leave England due to the religious intoleration that was there. And they come here and then they practice a similar form of that with people who do not agree with them. They believe that people that did not agree with them should be pushed out of the colonies. So some famous examples of that would be Roger Williams. He agreed with the Pilgrims on disagreed with Pilgrims on separating church and state. He would eventually fled south and create the colony of Rhode Island. Later on, Anne Hutchinson, she would be banished because of her view on women's rights. The big thing that she would do is actually host Bible studies and do that kind of thing within her own home. And again, during this time, it was seen that women should not be in that kind of role. And because of that, she would be put on trial. She would be found guilty and then be banished from the colony. And she would eventually found the colony of Portsmouth, which would become part of Rhode Island. So those are some famous examples of some dissidents that you see within those early colonies. I have a scene here for you to watch. Go check that out, talking about Anne Hutchinson. This is from a series PBS did about God in America, tracing the history of religion within America. Right. The Connecticut colonies, in 1639, you're going to see that some Puritans decide to leave Massachusetts and they found Hartford, Connecticut. They're going to adopt what is going to become known as the first written constitution in the West, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. And then, of course, they establish a church, a popularly elected governor and assembly, and put in place voting rights for property-owning men. But again, this is seen as very important because this is the first time you're actually having a written constitution in the New World. Yes, by this time you already have, here in Virginia, the House of Burgesses set up, but there was no written constitution put down, and that's why this Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is seen as so important. New Hampshire, that would be the last colony to be founded in New England. King Charles II would actually separate New Hampshire from the Massachusetts colony in order so that he could have some more control over the colonies in that region. And that is why you're going to see there's going to be a long dispute over territories north of this, such as Vermont and those areas between the different colonies that all wanted a piece of that. But yeah, New Hampshire was created because the king wanted some more royal control in this area of the world. You'll see by the 1640s, the New England colonies start to get very concerned about the constant threats they were feeling from France to their north, Dutch to their south, and the natives that were constantly there. So in 1643, you're going to see 4 New England colonies form a military alliance known as the New England Confederation. It would last about 40 years. And the reason why this is so important is because this is seen as early steps of the colonies starting to work together. Now, again, this was only the New England colonies. This wasn't all of the colonies, but it is important, that important first step of colonies working together and trying to be unified in their purpose. The flag right here, this would be used to represent a united New England during the American Revolution. And a lot of people believe, a lot of historians believe, that it harkened back to the solidarity that the New England colonies had during this New England Confederation. And you're going to see a lot of the New England-based flags have the pine tree on it, which are very, very prevalent up there. And that is, again, seen as another symbol of the New England colonies working together. Fortunately, this year, we're not going to be able to play the Witch Dot game. I won't even tell you about that. But hopefully in the future, maybe if your brothers and sisters have me, we'll be able to play that game. So middle colonies, I have a couple readings there for you about the middle colonies, specifically Pennsylvania, writings from William Penn and Daniel Pastorius. Read those and answer the question. So middle colonies, these were founded by William Penn, or Pennsylvania was, on land given to his family by the royal family to pay off debts that they actually had to his family. And William Penn saw this as a refuge for persecuted Quakers. Quakers were known for their pacifism, and they believed that God filled or that people were filled with grace and understanding from God. And that's part of why they believed in pacifism. They had a pacifistic policy towards the Native Americans and tried to avoid conflict with the Native Americans as much as possible. We'll talk about later on the conflict that will lead to. But they were able to become very, very prosperous within that. And William Penn, he would write Frame of Government in 1681. And in this, he would write about the idea of religious freedom for all Christians and would promote religious or representative government. And you would see within the Pennsylvania colonies that he would give religious freedom for all Christians. So that was seen as a haven for Christians to come there and know that you were not going to be persecuted by the Quakers that were in charge. Now, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, New York, we've already talked about them, how New York City would be taken over by the English from the Dutch. Many New York settlers were Puritans who had come there from New England. New Jersey, King James would actually split New Jersey from New York because he thought that the New York colony was too big, and that's how we got New Jersey. Delaware, William Penn, the same William Penn we just talked about, he was granted the lower 3 counties of Pennsylvania. He ended up granting them their own assembly, which effectively made them their own colony. And you're going to see that the governor of Pennsylvania and Delaware would actually be the same until the American Revolution, until Delaware would become its own. So if you ever wondered, Delaware, you looked at that and be like, how did that little area there become a state? Well, it originally had been part of Pennsylvania. Now, what were the economic characteristics of the middle colonies? You're going to see the middle colonies very heavily as based in trade. They would build ships there to go trading. Again, the climate and the soil in that area didn't really lend itself to large-scale farming. So that's why you see so much trading, especially out of ports such as New York and Philadelphia, which grow as seaport and commercial centers. And that's going to kind of be a hallmark of the middle colonies. And that's why you're going to see the middle colonies as a group is a very diverse area because you constantly have people coming in and out of those areas due to the seaports. Social characteristics, like I just mentioned, you have multiple religious groups in that area. Generally, most of these religious groups believed in some sort of religious tolerance. They had very flexible social structures. You didn't have that strict social hierarchy like you had here in Virginia between the landowners and then everybody else. And because of that, they were able to develop a middle class of artisans, entrepreneurs, and small farmers. So the middle colonies, as far as the colonies would go, would be the most diverse of them all. Political life, again, it varied based on what colony that you were in the middle colonies, Pennsylvania, New York, but often they represented and reflected the basic rights of Englishmen. So generally they would have some sort of assembly with the governor in charge, but again, very democratic in their views. Remember William Penn, that Frame of Government, and how he wrote about the importance of that type of government. So that ends us there on the Middle Colonies and the New England colonies. I hope you're able to see an easy contrast between the Southern, the Middle, and the New England colonies. Those differences, again, go back to the reasons that they were settled and the climate and the geography of those areas, which have a big impact in how what the future of those colonies look like. And at this point, too, you're going to even see that you have quite a difference in division in like culture and that kind of thing between the three, and that will continue to kind of divide over time. Even though they are all English, they make their own type of culture and social interactions here within the colonies. So as always, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic day.